In this unit notes, we're going to start talking about hyperbolas. So if we go up to the top, we have two different forms of equations for hyperbolas. We have our x minus h squared over a squared, and starting first, where this is going to open up to the left and to the right. And then we have the one where the y goes first. So y minus k squared over a squared is first, and that is when our hyperbola will open up and down. We have our center listed. We have our foci, our vertices, two different types of axes, and again, a relationship like in the ellipses with our a, b, and c values. And then we have our asymptotes that are down here. And they're slightly different from one equation to the next, depending on which standard form you start with. Again, the difference between the two is this one here starts with the x first, and it opens left and right. And this one over here starts with y first, and it opens up and down. In example 1, we are going to graph the hyperbola, which is in standard form for us already. So if we take a look, we have x plus 5 squared over 25 minus y minus 6 squared equal to 1. This is in standard form. The one thing we should recognize is that our y does not have a denominator. We could put that denominator in there. If it doesn't have a denominator, that means it's just over 1. So we could put that in there to make it a little bit easier for us to visualize what's happening. And then in order to graph this, the first thing we need is we need our center. So in order to find the center, our center is going to be our h and our k. Now remember, depending on which equation we have, our h and our k are in slightly different spots. But one thing to remember, our h is always with our x, and our k value is always with our y. And that's the same for all the things we've been graphing throughout the chapter. So your ellipses, your circles, your hyperbolas, your parabolas, and so forth. So if we come down to our problem, we have the x first, which means we are in the first table. So our x comes first and our y comes second. So our h is coming from within the x, and our k is coming from within the y. So we can say that our center is negative 5, 6. The next thing that we need to find is we need to find our transverse and our conjugate axes. Our transverse axis, since we're in this first one, is the horizontal length, and it is a length of 2 times a. And our conjugate axis is the vertical in this case, and it's 2 times b. So in order to find those axes, we need to know the a, the b, and our c value eventually. So to find the a and the b value, we're looking at underneath that denominator, underneath the x, and the denominator underneath the y. In our first equation here, our a is coming from underneath the x, and our b is coming from underneath the y in this problem. So if we know a squared is 25, we know that our a value is going to be 5. And that our b value is going to be 1, which is coming from the square root of what number's underneath that y. So then I can go ahead and I can find my transverse axis. I'm going to label that as TA. And again, that stands for the transverse axis. And in this case, it's horizontal, so I'm going to make a note of that. And it's horizontal, a distance of 2 times a. So 2 times 5, which is 10. And that 10 means it's the total horizontal distance from one side to the next. And then I can take a look at my conjugate axis. I'm going to label that as CA. That's my vertical axis for this problem. And it's 2 times the b value, or 2 times 1, which is a total length of 2. So I'm going to show you how to graph it by hand, and then I'm also going to talk you through how to graph it on Alex if you're using Alex to graph. So in order to graph it by hand, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and draw the center, or plot the center, which is at negative 5 and 6, which is right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a little imaginary box, so using a dotted line, by using our transverse axis and our conjugate axis. Our transverse axis is a total length of 10 in the horizontal direction. So we're going to count 10 to the right and 10 to the left from our center and plot those 2 points. I'm sorry, we're going to go 5 to the left and 5 to the right to plot those points. So we have a total length of 10 for our transverse axis. Okay, so we've got 5, and then another 5 will make 10. And then for our conjugate axis, we're going to go, it's a total length of 2, so we're going 1 up and 1 down. And we'll plot those points, so 1 above and 1 below. And what we're going to make is a little rectangular dotted box. So I have my rectangle. And within my rectangle, my center is the very middle, going in either direction. And then my asymptotes are going to go directly through the 2 corners on a diagonal. So my asymptotes are going to go through here, directly through the center, and both of these endpoints. And then again through here, going in this direction. So we're going to go ahead and draw those in. And get them as straight as you can. It's just a rough sketch. And then in the other direction as well. And then since our graph is opening left and right, these 2 points here are going to be our vertices of our graph. So we can go ahead and now draw our graph, which will be a parabola shape going in both directions, and it's going to ride along those asymptotes but not touch them. If you have questions on graphing it by hand, please let me know. Next, I want to go over with you on how to do it on Alex. So if you're going to do it on Alex, and I'm going to write a little note for you so you can write this down as well. The first thing that you want to do on Alex is you are going to click the hyperbola button. Number 2, you are going to plot the center. And then number 3, from the center, so starting at the center, you are going to do your transverse axis in one direction only. So you'll do your transverse axis in one direction only and plot that point. In step 4, you're going to go back to the center and do your conjugate axis in one direction. They're only requiring it to do in 1 instead of in 2. So if we go back to our graph real quick, let me show you what I mean. So on Alex, you'll come and you'll plot that center point, which is right here. And then you're going to do your transverse axis. So I would count out in either direction, left or right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'd plot that point right there. Then I'm going to come back to my center, and I'm going to do my conjugate axis. So I'd go 1 in either direction and plot that point, and that should form your hyperbola for you. So that's all you have to do when you're doing it on Alex. Questions, let me know.